My name is Tabi Kiyoko, and I'm the Chapter Lead Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Safaricom. I'm very passionate about creating equitable and inclusive workplaces where everyone, feels they are respected, valued, and appreciated, and empowered to thrive. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Linda Okolo. I champion disability inclusion and diversity initiatives at Kenya Airways. One of my biggest passions is to create impact, and I believe that when we make our workplace more inclusive, then we are able to reach more people and contribute to the sustainable being there of Africa, future of Africa, meaning that Africa will be there even after we are gone if we include everybody. And also what I find very valuable amongst the community of persons with disabilities, great talent. We saw this morning a person with disability entertain us, and that was, it was quite some talent. And that's what we are missing out on when we don't include them in our spaces, in our workplaces, and that is why I do this passionately. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jessica Rafuse with Microsoft. This is my first time to Africa, let alone Kenya, so thank you so much for including me. I am learning a ton. Microsoft has a long history of disability inclusion and accessibility. We believe that people with disabilities are a strength. We do not hire people with disabilities out of charity, out of philanthropy. They make our company better, they make our products better. People with disabilities make us more innovative. And I'd love to share plenty of examples of the type of technology that you use today that was created by people with disabilities. We are hiring the very best candidates, and they happen to be disabled, and in fact, that makes them the best. So I want to understand how our philosophy about disability, about excellence, how that applies to all of the great learnings you already have in Africa. So thank you for being patient with me as I learn, and I appreciate the partnership.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lerato Kobuzi. I'm the Senior Program Manager for Employer Engagement and Partnerships at the African Leadership Academy. I work with Val, and in my role, I manage our global portfolio of employer partners, and it's not only to secure career opportunities for our young leaders in the form of internships and jobs, but we also collaborate with our partners on building programs that give our young leaders extended opportunities to be exposed in the different sort of career spaces and explore career pathways while working together on various projects with industry professionals. I think for us, what's very important as well, in addition to everything else that Val said, is while we're on this, our inclusion journey, because we really just at the beginning, we've done quite a bit of work, but we've got a long way to go. But we want to focus a lot more on having impactful conversations with our employer partners. There's employers who are already inclusive and have been doing it very well, and we'd like to learn what those best practices are. And for those who are part of us, who are interested, we'd like to be their support partner, along with some of our technical partners we're working with to help them get on the journey. And then I think lastly, the ones who aren't, it's like actually wake up, smell the coffee. We're here already, we've been here, and how can we actually be positive advocates, right, of encouraging other employers to be more inclusive in their workspaces. So I'm here to learn, and I'm happy to see some of our partners. You might not know, but Standard Chartered, we've recruited, or has recruited from us, Microsoft as well as Google, but in America, not in Africa, so we must fix that. And then we've been having talks with Safaricom as well, so looking forward to build up on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Kaylee from the MasterCard Foundation, and my colleague Andre and I, we lead disability inclusion across Africa and our work also in Indigenous communities in Canada. So the MasterCard Foundation's overarching strategy is called Young Africa Works, looking to get 30 million young people into what we call dignified and fulfilling work by 2030. And so Andre and I ensure that that's also disability inclusive, so that youth with disabilities are included in that. So all of the work that we do across the foundation has a lens of accessibility and inclusion. So we're looking at the barriers that youth with disabilities face in Africa in accessing education and employment, and what does it take to disrupt that at scale, and how can we work across the continent to make that happen.
Yeah, my name is Andre, and same thing. Yeah, we just here to, glad to see different stakeholders on the table. We work with some, I can say some who we work with here, and we hope to learn more about what others are doing as the MasterCard Foundation deepen our work in enhancing access to employment and skilling for youth with disabilities.
Top of the morning, everyone. Great. So my name is Michael Onyango, and I work with the largest WhatsApp platform in Kenya. We are called Forgotten Bottom Millions, 4BM. And what we do is we ensure that all these opportunities that you speak about, all these job openings and various things, actually reach all the forgotten bottom millions across all the 47 counties in Kenya. We reach over 500,000 people every single week, and all the information that we share is fully verified. We've been doing this since 2016, and it's at no cost to all our users. So what we do is we ensure that when you have all these great things, all these great opportunities, our platform is very eclectic in terms of the resources that we share. For example, like this morning, you'd find that we would share an opportunity from Google, possibly looking for somebody to work within AI. On the very same day, we'll share an opportunity with somebody looking for a gardener who to work in their compound, so that nobody is left out. I'm happy to be here in the room to hopefully to be able to take the information from that's here and amplify to the families that have people who really, really need to know that these opportunities do exist and are there. Thank you very much.
Hello, it is still morning. Good morning, everybody. My name is Wambura Kizito from Tanzania. I work in the government sector, from Prime Minister's Office, Labor, Youth, sorry, Employment and the Persons with Disability, from specifically the Department of Persons with Disability. So I'm here with the people mostly from private sectors, but what the government of Tanzania does through the Prime Minister's Office, it deals with the coordination of all issues related to persons with disability. So my responsibility in that ministry specifically is to prepare an environment that is conducive for employment from both government sector as well as the private sector. Nice to be with you. I hope to learn a lot from the private sector and see what we can do in Tanzania to ensure that persons with a disability are not left behind. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Alexander Kojo Tete. I prefer to be called Kojo. I'm a local champion. In other words, I run the Center for Employment of Persons with Disabilities in Ghana. It's an organization that was set up in 2008. Before then, I used to be the national director for the Association of the Physically Disabled. I had the opportunity to go on the Commonwealth Professional Fellowship in the UK. And there, I got to learn about how the UK is able to create employment opportunities for disabled people. So when I came down in 2008, I decided to resign my job and set up the Center for Employment of Persons with Disabilities, which I've been running till now. It's been good, it's been very challenging, but that is the passion. I hate seeing disabled people suffering, and in Ghana you find a lot of people, disabled people begging on the streets, and not only them, but also they carry little children who push them, and so it affects the lives of these little children who should have been in school. And so we've been doing well, trying to facilitate employment, bridging the gap between disabled job seekers and employers. But we realize that there's another population, which is the uneducated person with disability. So what we did was to see if we can put them into entrepreneurship training and facilitate loans and grants for them to do their business. And that caught up like a bonfire. I mean, a lot of people got interested, a lot of disabled people, even the educated ones, got interested to establish it on their own because it's difficult. It's difficult finding a job. So, so we in 2018 we set up the Ghana Chamber for Entrepreneurs with Disabilities, and so it became like a network of entrepreneurs with disabilities, which is regionally based. Let me just end here. Thank you.
Sorry, Kojo. Time is tight. Thanks, Irene. Good morning, everybody. My name is Lizzie Kiama. I run Disability, which is a disability organization that primarily works with women and girls with disabilities in Kenya. The focus of our work is sexual reproductive rights. So before I lose you, there are linkages in terms of employment. We realized, for example, the lack of access to information. So when you're sharing opportunities, for example, when it comes to employment or any other sector, the disability community and the communities of women and girls that I work with have experienced challenges accessing this information. So we don't know where to get it, how to get it. It's not in formats that are accessible in ways that we can consume and so forth. So we design solutions in partnership with communities of women and girls with disabilities. So for example, we have a program that builds the capacities of women over 40, women with disabilities over 40, with market-based skills. So using technology, ensuring that these women who have probably never been to school or only have achieved, primary education, how do they then provide services that make sense to the communities that they serve in terms of access to health? But then how do they also enable us to report to our donors? So, how do they access Zoom? How do they prepare reports and things like that? So really practical skills that can be utilized in the workplace. And then we then realized young girls with disabilities also don't have access to the same skills. Our education system, unfortunately, is very segregated, and as such has very few investments when it comes to market-based skills. So again, with the resources that we have, we do that. And then we realize also data is a big issue. So we designed a very, not data, a low bandwidth, this is the word that I was trying to figure, low bandwidth platform that uses a USSD platform, technology to collect data on persons with disabilities. It allows persons with disabilities to self-register. We have upwards of 35,000 persons with disabilities currently, and this is not in partnership because we pay for the service, but it uses Safaricom technology. So it's useful because we don't have similar platforms that allow persons with disabilities to self-identify. Rather, the government requires a medical process to provide an intervention. So all this to say that everything is, interconnected. And as much as we work on sexual reproductive rights, the reality is economic empowerment, income generation, education, employment are still part of that ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. If you haven't introduced yourself, you'll do so in the next round. But I have to give my boss just 30 seconds, the chair of the Enable Board. Just introduce yourself.
Okay. Thank you. She got it wrong. I'm not a boss. I'm a board member and chair Enable, but I work for the judiciary of the Republic of Kenya, one of the most inclusive arms of government that I know of. And when we're talking skills, trust me, in this country, it is skills that count. It is your professional skills and your ability to handle your tasks at the job, on the job that counts. So for me, it's a great learning curve here, and I'm really pleased to hear what we all have to say about it. 30 seconds, are they over?
No, thank you so much, Laibuta. So guys, thank you so much for sharing about your different companies. Inclusive Africa is also about networking. So if you've had something interesting from someone, I'm sure you'll connect while you're here. So thank you so much. I'll hand over to my colleague, Steve, and he'll take you through the rest of the agenda for today.
Thank you, Irene. So this seats in front here was set up for a panel. And I'm looking at the panelists seated in between. I'm wondering, do I disturb you guys to come here? And I'm thinking, nah. You can still share when seated from where you are, so that it's really collaborative. And as you can tell, there is wealth of knowledge and experience in the room. The challenge that we have is that we have an hour. That is the challenge that we have. So, and we have a lot to discuss about. In fact, I was looking at the topics that we shared with you that we want to handle. We want to talk about skills mismatch, talk about limited access to training and education, talk about stigma and discrimination, part of what Lizzie was sharing here, accessibility, talk about employer awareness. So these are a lot to discuss in a very, very short duration of time. So I have 4 panelists, and I'll introduce them shortly. And these panelists might lead the discussion, but I'll challenge all of us to chip in, contributing to them. But I would want to choose 2 topics to focus on out of all of this, so that we don't have to be all over. We focus on the skills mismatch as a continuation of the discussion we were having this morning. All of us are doing quite a lot individually or even collaboratively as far as skills mismatch is concerned. And then we talk a bit about the employer awareness, because there is still a lot in that space when it comes to employers making commitment, let's say at the board level or at the management level, and when it comes to enforcement of these commitments through the different line managers, through the different, and especially for bigger companies, then there is a lot of bottlenecks. So I would want us to concentrate on those 2 topics for the next 1 hour. I think they cut across uniformly for all of us, and also selfishly so, I would want us to gather some of those insights, because we want to do a lot in that area, and engaging all of you in figuring out how can we collaborate over and above this particular engagement, this particular conference. It's my dream that as we continue, we are more coming over to report what we have done, rather than preach to the choir and say the same things that we have been talking about, the challenges that we know, but we are saying we did this and this and this in the first 3 months, and then we got stuck here, and then this company came and unstuck us, and then we are still stuck here. And what can we do next? So it's very specific, and we can be able to pick from each other and really move something. We can't do everything, but we can definitely do something. That's okay? Great. So I have, I would like to briefly introduce my panel from, so I have Paul Kasimu here from Safaricom. Then I have Philip Bob. We will call you Bob, like you asked us to. He's from Google. Then we have Michael Onyango from Forgotten Billions, and Tom Shivo, right there at the corner, And then we have Rose, Maruti from, yes, there you are, from KCB. So, now, we are out of time. I almost had a heart attack. So, we just started and then we are out of time. So I think I want to start from where you are, Bob, because you have been doing quite a lot at Google, but from this skills mismatch perspective, maybe you can share with us what your experience has been and what you have been investing in, briefly, on the skills match, what you're looking for to bring on board at Google, and what you're finding in the market, and you have an African view.
Yeah, thank you very much, moderator. I actually, before I jump into, I just wanted to say that when I saw Paul as a panelist, I went to Tabi and said, why are you putting me on the same panel with Paul? Because, you know, Paul is my mentor. You know, when I came to Nairobi 17 months ago, I think the first meeting I attended where Paul spoke, that was like the most impactful meeting I've had in Kenya. And I learned a lot from him. So perhaps I want to leave the skills mismatch to Paul and the rest of to talk about it. Let me go to the employer awareness, because I think that's very important. One of the things I realized when I joined Google was that talking about PWDs, we generally tend to have metropolitan discussions. What do I mean by metropolitan discussions? We have discussions in the cities. You know, if we are not talking about PWDs in Nairobi, maybe we are taking it to Mombasa. If we are very lucky, we might go to Kisumu, and that's where it ends. And when you consider the fact that a country like Kenya, more than 50%, close to 60% of Kenyans are living in rural areas, then you realize that the discussion we are having is actually not targeting everybody. So that's one point I want to raise. The other one is, I think when we are talking as employers, we tend to have like a one-size-fits-all approach to recruitment, which I find also quite unfortunate, particularly organizations, global corporates, maybe like the one I work for, you know, maybe like Microsoft, perhaps not Safaricom, you know, because we are coming from a certain environment where we have a certain approach to recruitment. That's the same approach we want to cascade down to societies where we are going to expand. If we have a US approach, we want to have that same approach for Kenya. And things don't work like that because the systems are not the same. Then the other thing is, which Paul talked about earlier in the other discussion, was the issue of policy incoherence. But now, let me go back to employer awareness. I feel that we talk a lot. We talk a lot about disability inclusion, about this, about that. But when it comes to really going into the nitty-gritties, I think that's where the challenge is. When I came to Kenya, the first thing I decided to do, I've been in Kenya for 17 months. I think I've been to 22 counties, you know, because I feel that if I am going to reach out, if we are going to have a diverse and inclusive workforce, then you need to go to the societies, to the communities that you are trying to attract. Yes, we are in Nairobi. Nairobi is the melting point. But what's happening in Mombasa? What's happening in Kisumu? What's happening in Kakamega? What's happening in Nyeri? What's happening in Embu? What's happening in Meru? Do we know? Because there are talents there. There are people there who also acquire for the same opportunities that we want to give people. But if we don't reach out to those communities, if we are not aware about their existence, you know, there are beautiful stories out there. You go there, you meet talent. You meet very intelligent people who have the same aspirations as the person in Nairobi. But because you've not reached out to him in those communities, you do not even know about their existence. So the first thing we need to do is we need to decentralize discussions when it comes to PWD inclusion. I think that's the first thing we really need to do, decentralization.
May I follow up on that point? Just how does it work now at Google if you're thinking about this awareness? Because you have a big workforce, and you also have partners that you collaborate with that are part of your delivery chain. How do you do it at Google, and where do you get stuck at in this awareness when you look at the gap between you and your end user?
When I came to Nairobi, the first thing I did, 3 days after I arrived there on the 3rd of October, started work on the 6th of October. The 9th of October, I went to the National Council for Persons with Disabilities. Because I said, if we are going to leverage our partners for a diverse and inclusive workforce, then you need to have a starting point. The starting point was to go to the National Council for Persons with Disabilities, sit down with them, and which organizations can you recommend to me? You know? Because somebody needed to guide me. So the first thing is, where do you start? You need to know your starting point. And that was what I did. Then from there, they recommended institutions, organizations that I could work with. I started reaching out to them individually, you know. Then I also reached out. I said, okay, now we've addressed the issue of PWDs. What about the issue of having an equitable workforce? What about women? What about gender representation? What about equity? You know? Then I started going out to those organizations that perhaps most people don't talk about, you know? Then I look at that, I said, okay, what's happening? Now let's look at the ethnic dimension, because sometimes that is the big elephant in the room that we don't want to talk about. And I can give an example. You can go to an institution where they will tell you 55% of our workforce are women. And I keep asking this question. Kenya, we have 54 million people. We have 47 ethnic groups. If they tell you we have 55% of our workforce as women, the question I always keep asking is, how many percent of those women are really representing women in Kenya? And the reason I ask this is, and I always challenge people, out of the 47 ethnic groups in Kenya, how many ethnic groups are represented amongst those women? You know? If you don't have Kikuyu, you have Luo, you have Kalenjin, you have
the familiar ones.
The familiar ones, the top 6 ones. You know? Beyond those top 6 ones, you have to struggle to pinpoint who else is represented. So the next thing I did was, which communities are not represented? I decided to go out to those communities. You know, I went to the north. I went to Kajiado. I decided to go to those communities that we are not talking about. Then beyond that, I said, okay, we're a Christian community. Are the Muslims represented in what we are doing? How many percent of our workforce are Muslims? How many Muslim universities do we have in Kenya? I reached out to them. I said, this is Google, this is what we are doing, and we want to. And the interesting thing was, most times people will say, hey, Google, you are the first Google I've seen in person. You know? That's something I keep hearing all over, you know? But that has been our approach. Because if you want to have a diverse and inclusive workforce, you have to be intentional about it. So for us, intentionality is the key to what we do.
It's the thing. Maybe Rose can pick from there, from your experience at KCB. You have, if I think about the touch points, and I've never worked in a bank, but you have a lot of touch points with so many people at so many levels. Your customers, your workforce, your suppliers, you have very many touch points. Over and above that, you still have your workforce internally. When you think about this topic of awareness, and all the people who are associated with the bank, with KCB as a bank, and the extent to which you have made efforts to make them aware, to raise awareness both at the management level, at all levels, what has worked well for KCB, and where are you still stuck that we can pick up and do something about it? What has been your experience?
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Rose Maruti. I'm from KCB. I said KCB Bank. the biggest bank in Kenya. I head organization design and change, and one of my mandates is actually around the issue of diversity and inclusion. In terms of employee, I think that's one place we haven't done very well because we have a very low percentage in terms of people with disability working for us. There is a population, but we feel we can do better because we have a lot of opportunities. So one of the things we are doing is then to identify what are the roles or which are the roles that we can be able actually to reserve for people with disability and go out deliberately to source people who can be able to fit in those roles. What we have done well is through our foundation program, KCB Foundation. We have two flagship programs that we run. We have the education program that we sponsor students from high school to university, education, and provide support. It's not just the education, but the upkeep, and make sure that they're going through. So one of the things we've done is 10% of the people we sponsor must be people with disability. And it's just not in Nairobi. Our program runs across where we are represented. We're in more than 220 branches. So in every location we are represented, we participate in that program. So they participate, we get students from there, and we support them. Same applies to the university, as they go to university and tertiary colleges and the TVETs. Then there we bring in issues of innovation. So those in college and in TVETs then get things like laptops. They get certain trainings that help them then to start being entrepreneurs and learning the things like coding to help them improve their skills. So we are trying to connect the dots as they come from high school all the way to college. Then we have the second program, the entrepreneurship program, which we call Tujiajiri. I think you've heard of it. Again, runs across all our branches, where we work with SMEs to identify those who need support in terms of skills. And how that happens is actually through our branches. We assess and say who are the SMEs or which are the SMEs that individuals came to seek maybe for funding, or they needed support from the bank, but because either their businesses were not properly set up, or they didn't have the skills, it wasn't very clear what they wanted to do. Those are our candidates into Tujiajiri program. So then in the Tujiajiri program, we've partnered with TVETs and technical colleges that provide the skills. So they are trained through partnership. I think we've also partnered with MasterCard Foundation in this program, and we fund for them to get the skills, and then after they get the skills, then we support them actually through the business. So eventually they would come back as our customers. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to bring this question to both Paul and also Tom from KQ, and it's just, I know one of the reasons why there's a closed door meeting is to also allow us to lower our guard a little bit, to have real conversations and open up about what we are struggling to do as employers. And once we share that, then we can see what can we pick up. That's why it's not in the plenary, because you don't want to find your captions out there. So, Paul, you have one of the approaches that we have seen from private sector employers. The first point or entry level for awareness is, as a company, we are doing something about disability. We are sponsoring children, or we are doing this, or it's more from a programming perspective. You have taken a different tangent when it comes to this with sponsorship of the Business Disability Network and bringing many other employers. And the programs that you've been running, bringing young people with disabilities to be part of your mainstream workforce and investing heavily in them, even though some of them struggle to transition. But what would you say is still the struggle that Safaricom has seen in this journey? Because you have put tremendous investment in it, and some of it doesn't pay off, and some of it actually you end up losing because you have employers also in the room who take up some of the youth that you have really trained and mentored, right? It's a good thing that more people with disabilities are getting into work, but it's also a struggle for you as an employer. What has your experience, and what would you say this is where you're still stuck, that other initiatives and funders can come in to help you as an employer?
It's a good question. And let me see whether I can just be targeted for the sake of hearing also from others, because I think there's also great stuff happening. Normally when I'm asked that question, I'll always say there are three things: mindsets, skill sets, tool sets. Anything we speak will fall into one of those. Mindsets, whether it is stigma, discrimination, whether it's just, whether there's any leadership appetite, whether we think, because it's what you bring to the table, the mindset. I think that's the biggest thing, that if you can conquer that you will be speaking to something. When the intent is there, skill sets, and whether those skill sets are around how do you develop kids from down there, future skills, how do you ensure relevance, if it's the academies, how do you partner to influence curricula. I sit in a university council, and with MasterCard we've partnered to say, why can't we develop future skills for persons with disability, and with a real DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion lens. So the skill set is the other bit. And then when you talk of tool sets, it's, again, yes, you may train, but also how do you ensure that you equip people right? So mindset, skill set, tool set. Let me go one up. And at Safaricom, I think the first thing is whatever we do is around purpose. And the why is important, because I find people tactically saying, let's do this, me too. And if you don't first go back to say, why do you exist? And tie it up to everything else you do, to say, whatever we do, we want to be inclusive, we want to transform lives, that's our purpose. And some of the things we've done around that are, first, I think we have two foundations. And there's an M-Pesa Foundation, and there's a Safaricom Foundation, and they focus on the same but slightly different bit. But the one story we tell that is perhaps unique in Safaricom is the M-Pesa Academy. And we have a full secondary school, and we go to the 47 counties in Kenya, and we pick 2 of the kids that are completely disadvantaged. And we have a diversity lens. So we put not just gender, but also kids with disability. And if you go there, you'll be shocked. Those kids live a life that is better than any of our kids will have gone through. It's best in class. But in there is also to say, how do we influence even STEM at lower levels, right from primary school? How do we move around that? And for us, we also put targets for ourselves. And you know what? My CEO had the target as a starting to say, this is the shape and look of the organization I want to lead. Why? For the purpose of this organization. And he would speak. And one time he went, in fact, he was in Vienna speaking around purpose and the shared value. Because when you speak that way, then you elevate the game to not tokenism. It is doing the right thing and doing the things that are working. Now, back to your question. I think when we went for the Global Disability Forum in 2018, there is a charter, and I don't know how many of us have seen the charter, just 10 elements there. We picked 3. And the 3 we picked as Safaricom was leading on economic empowerment, removing stigma and discrimination, and assistive devices, because we are in that game, whether it's our customers, whether it's our kids, anybody in there. So those became 3 big things that lead our diversity and inclusion agenda. When that team came back, I chose to lead the forum in Kenya. And we brought central government and county government. We had a member of parliament who was also disabled, who was living with disability, who was leading that piece. We brought the universities, because we felt academia needed to come in again and help us with the skills conversation. Then we brought the media, because this is happening, but sometimes you have to pay for even this story to be told. the better story that will run will be a politician who has insulted another one. That's headline. And then you say, why can't we start influencing the kind of things that we are seeing in? And then we also talked about, I talked about the data analytics. And the final one that we spoke around were, in addition to economic empowerment, is entrepreneurship, and KCB led that particular piece. So a real structured bit, but we found very hard to get partnerships. We speak like this and we disappear. And then the next time we have Enable calling us for the meeting. We have a Kenya Business Disability Network where we've said, please come. And we wanted it to demystify. You don't have to be Safaricom to be in this disability. I mean, the Kenya Business Disability Network. However small and going beyond the metropolis of Nairobi. And we are seeing, we only have 35 organizations that have signed up. ILO helped us develop 10 principles of how you can be much more inclusive. And we are not even bothered. So I'm like, what would it take for us to shift the narrative to a point where we go beyond speaking? And we don't light small fires, we light one big bonfire. Correct. That the world will take note of.
Correct.
I'll pause there.
Thank you so much. It's the reason why I brought that question to you, because it's tough. And also, it's tough, and you're equally tough. But also hearing from you, Tom, from your experience, you can hand him the mic. From your experience, now, and especially if you think about some of the accommodations that might be needed, because for you, you have also multiple touch points. And I think you handle a lot of fires that come your way when either clients with disabilities are struggling at any point in their user journey when they are working with you. So when you look at it from the client perspective, also from your workforce, what we want to highlight from this session is those things that you have done well that we can replicate, and those things that you have tried but you're still stuck, that you need initiatives that can be brought about that you might not be able to tackle alone as an entity, but we can be able to rally around together. This big fire that Paul is talking about, we are putting them in that. What are some of those things?
So allow me first of all to just give some context of the airline very, very briefly, on the basis that most organizations will go into this agenda on the basis that you are a profitable organization. The airline has been going through some turbulence, and we have had some legacy issues, and we now are coming out of it on the basis of the transformation journey that we have. And therefore, for sure, budgeting and providing that as a priority is never going to be a priority until the business turns around. So last year, the struggles that we've had is to put this as a main agenda within the business on the basis that the priority is, can we turn around fast, and therefore can we even support such agendas? So from my level, what we've been trying to do is to bring it as an agenda in business, but it's only until last year when we hit a huge milestone around our profitability that it started becoming an important thing. But we need to change ideas and minds of leadership in around us, that it is part of the journey that will make you either an employer of choice, the company of choice, or otherwise. It is part of the agenda around transformation. And therefore, some of the struggles that we've had, especially for our airline, remember we have got a passenger side. Our aircrafts are not necessarily tailored to capture even the path around the journey that we have got about 53 touch points. And if you look at all those touch points, then none of them have been customized towards people differently enabled. And you would find that that has never been an agenda. So we have now taken an innovation hub where it's purely just dealing with innovation. It is in-sourced. It's an internal organization. We have got staff contributing into it, and we have incubation centers in it, supported by different agencies. And there are two specific projects that we are running still in the works. One is around what I'd call the customer journey around the airport, where there is the airport journey for people differently enabled is going to have a differentiation and, of course, use of technology. Mm-hmm. And the second one is in two fronts, assistive technology, and then also one around brailles, so that even in the aircraft, when a customer requires that, then it's available, and we have staff trained or having capacity for that particular. And this all came through our Innovation Hub. The second challenge that we've had is purely about regulatory. We are a very restrictive, regulated industry. And just for instance, from training, you'd find that we have challenges in even convincing the Civil Aviation Authority that people living with disability can take on certain jobs, because our jobs are licensed. For you to be a cabin crew, a pilot, an engineer, you need licenses. And there is nowhere around the regulation that encourages us to do that. So we've done one thing. We've decided to ignore some of the what I'd call gray areas of the regulation and start driving that agenda. So for the first time now, we have been able to take in albinos, persons living with albinism, into our training school, and in the next 4 months you will see albino cabin crew, and that will be a first. But this is part of trying to show that it doesn't matter. We have regulation. If I just give an example of, if you are too fat, you cannot be this type of employee, for example, pilot or cabin crew. But that's just an example. But if you are physically disabled, there are certain jobs that you can do. The third thing is around funding. And I'll specifically talk about funding for, and someone was talking about marginalized communities. Now, for you to become a pilot, you need probably it's a lot of money for you to become a pilot, and it will take you 27 months or so for you to become a pilot. For you to become an engineer, it will take you 3-4 years, and then heavy certification, and it's a very expensive thing. So you'd find that those who then become pilots, unless they are funded, it will be an elitist, what I'd call profession. So we used to have funding, but it's now not there. So how do we get students to be funded so that they can be able to enter into some of these so-called elitist programs that they will be isolated?
Yeah.
So we have adopted some community in Turkana. We have one pilot from Turkana, that's northern Kenya, and him being an example, we are now looking for such opportunities where we can fund such people into our ab initio programs and then access some of this. And then lastly is we are also looking at targeted where we have skills challenges. For example, we have 3-4 main skill areas of opportunity that we are looking at in terms of entering into this horizon. Number one, of course, is digital. But digital will most likely be normal people. So we have partnered with an organization for neurodivergent disability. And for the first time, we're having interns, about 4 of them, who are either autistic or challenged it's a very difficult word, neurodiversive.
Neurodivergent.
Yes. Yeah. So, but there's a cultural issue. Our managers are not prepared. Yeah. Our staff are not prepared. Yeah. The infrastructure is not prepared. We even don't have the right technology for such things. So through that, we are enabling bring your own device. Yeah. We are customizing our devices for that so that we are able to accommodate such. So it's currently in experimentation, and we believe that it will work through. So those are some of the hits and misses that we have.
Okay, I think there is a lot more that we need to dig deeper into that and hear also about the experiences, because there is a lot that goes into disability when we're talking about awareness. From inclusive language, for example, how do you refer, how do you, when you're talking about people with disabilities, which words do you use, which ones do you not use? And especially being in the customer service industry, if I come in and then you are referring to me using derogatory terms, then chances are I'll blast you off. And if you are, these are some of the things that I think should be the starting point when it comes to awareness. And we'll still come back to that conversation, especially at the board level and at the C-suite level, because you have the experience. What do we need to do from a non-profit perspective? And we are investing in this. We are asking for funders to come in and partner with us and put in money in this. But we need to understand from an employer's perspective, for those of you that are mandated with this, where you are getting stuck, because from your experience, you are getting stuck at making this the priority in the agenda, because we are still looking at the bottom line as a corporate. You're still going to check where are we in terms of our revenues, and they're not where we need to be, so how do we need to accelerate this? And some of the things that we can help you do is to give you this information, because we have the data. You saw from Philip Thiko's presentation, just the amount of money that you stand to unlock by targeting the community of persons with disabilities as part of the bottom line. But how do we put this data, this information, to help in your board level conversations so that they are part of the training, they are in this kind of sessions, and we train them, we tell them, when you're talking about persons with albinism, it's persons with albinism, not albinos. And they'll be, okay, we didn't know that. No, now you know. How does that make sense? Well, there are many other things that you need to know so that it makes your approvals and your prioritization easier. But talking about information, we can come to Michael from Bottom Billions. All this information, the target group, you can pass him the mic. He's on this side. All these conversations that are happening at the C-suite level, at the boardroom level, they end up as a piece of information externally. We are looking for this, or we need this, or we'll no longer do this, there is this policy output, and that's what you share outwards to your target group. And what happens is that there is always a perception. The people who are receiving this information, if you ask, you know how to draw personas. If you would go to Muranga and find a young person with a disability, ask them to draw Safaricom if Safaricom is a man, then you see they might draw someone with two horns because they think Safaricom is this. They don't see a picture of what Safaricom as an entity is doing, but you are in this gap of communicating and receiving a lot of feedback information. How should we program information when we are targeting to these young people to just help them understand that we are trying to do something as different corporate employers, organizations, but this is what we can be able to share to you. What is your experience on that?
Thank you very much. So first, let me just acknowledge that as we must accept, most young people are not consuming information the way all of us sitting around this table are. I heard Paul earlier on complaining that newspapers will always report the wrong things, but let me assure you, not a single young person who's under the age of 28 ever looks at a newspaper. So if your newspaper is your primary means of trying to reach them, you're actually talking to yourself. You're not talking to them. And interestingly, just again, and actually our new statistics has actually come from, Safaricom, the organization. The highest users and the highest users of TikTok in the world are Kenyans. So that, yes, and that information is from Safaricom. Yes, it is. Yeah, yes, Kenya. Also, for those of you who are not from Kenya, just a little bit of insight. I don't say this in any manner of disrespect. Kenya possibly has the best human resource on this continent. And I say that unapologetically because if you look at anything from a technological perspective, in terms of uptake of technology, Kenya is up there. That's just who we are. One of the greatest things that has favored us is that we are lacking in any strong mineral resources or any other heavy capital base. So our human capital and our human resource is where it is that we have now shown our prowess and we are at. And with that said, and coming back to your question, to reach young people, it has to be the platforms which they use and which they consume. And, And if you watch the young people around you in your homes or in the villages or even when you travel across the 22 counties that you've gone to, the one thing that occupies them is what they hold in their hands, their phone. So we as 4BM, I had said earlier on, reach about 500,000 people a week in all the 47 counties. What we continue to do is to have bite-sized information that gets what we need to get across in a way in which they'll consume. So at any one time, anything that we share, which may be in the form of if it's in the form of a video or anything, it will never exceed 45 seconds. It's a tough job. It's a very tough job, but unfortunately, that is how they're wired. Bob, I'm very happy that finally somebody who's has a soul like mine, who finally knows that Nairobi is not Kenya and Kenya is not Nairobi. I've said that for many years. And I'm happy that Bob realized that when he came, and the first thing he did is he went out to the 22 counties. Thank you very much. And as he had said, in fact, let me help with some stats. Actually, 70% of Kenya's population does not live in Nairobi, it actually lives outside of Nairobi. So a lot of the times, the markets that you're looking at, the things that you're looking for, if, as MasterCard, you're not working within, if the projects that you're funding and the places where your money is things which are geared around Nairobi, you're actually talking to yourself and you're just reporting very nicely on your books back to your board, but you're not really making any impacts. So I need to say this a bit boldly and a bit loudly so we get it right. The chair from the judiciary made a very important and pertinent point and said that the judiciary has actually taken up working and policies with people who are abled differently in a way that needs to be possibly copied and looked at. But also, let me just put it this way, the largest employer in this country is not government. So if we're not doing anything with government, if we're not working around the county governments, again, we're not touching anything. We're just going to continue speaking in this room. County governments have county public service boards. And the great thing is that 30% of that board is and has people abled differently sitting on that board. I am privileged in that in another life of mine, I did work in a county and I did see how strongly those board members did push the agenda for people who are able differently. So if it's about putting resources, it's about where the funding should go for employee awareness, we've got to look at government and we have to work closely with the government institutions which are already there because, like I said, they are the biggest employers. But let me come back and also say one thing to everybody in this room. I'm one of the few people who was very excited when COVID happened, and I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. Because before COVID happened, I used to work from home and online. And so when people would tell me, want to come to your office, and I'll say, my office is anywhere there's internet, everybody thought I must be a scammer, I must be a con man. So when COVID happened, I was so happy because everybody got it. But using that, I want to put it to everybody in this room and all the largest bank in the country, the airline that is now coming out of turbulence, and the other people who are here, and also the other people from across the continent, is that there is enough technologies that can enable you to have people who are abled differently work with you, and the key output that you should be looking for, and again, I will probably ask Paul to chip in on this, should be output, not hours. It is what has been outputted. That should be what's on the table. Not what time they come in, do they get to work, how do they reach here, how are we going to get them here? No.
Yeah.
You are lucky that we have Microsoft sitting here in the room. Microsoft owns LinkedIn. Possibly speak to Microsoft later on and find out how you can possibly have some of the jobs that you want posted on LinkedIn, but more so, there's enough devices, even from Google who sits here, from a technological point of view. So I am saying that we do not have to start thinking about the things that we need to start doing. We have enough already on the table that we must put to use.
Yeah, I think
so. Yes, so that then we are making a headway, and that means therefore that even a person who's living in Turkana, even a person who's in Kilifi, somebody who's in Kapenguria, somebody who is in Malaba, somebody who is in Mukongwe, so long as what we can do is to get affordable and reliable connectivity and devices to them, then the issue about having people who are abled differently into our workforce and from the forgotten bottom millions, who are the majority of us in this country and also across the continent, becomes a thing of the past.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And you have touched on a couple of topics that are taking us to also the next round of input. And we'll come back to you, Munyori, to hear about, because you have also a lot of experience with the recruitment for these young people joining the workforce. And a lot of employers, probably some of them have come to you to ask for advice, because the working model is different from what we're used to the older generation and what the young people are able to take. But maybe we hear from someone from ALX, AL Africa Leadership. Yes. Just a question from you in terms of the skilling component and placement, because you do that a lot. What do you still see as the gap? Because you take on, you work from the demand side. Maybe you can explain a bit your model. You have an employer who will tell you we need this kind of skills, and then you'll look for them, you'll train them, you'll place them. Have you worked on both sides, where you have a supply on one side and you're looking for employers who are onboarding them, and from the demand side where you have employers who are specific on the talent they need, the number they need, the location, and you're just headhunting for them? What are the gaps on either way from the demand or supply side?
So what I can say is that we actually experience both sides. If I can maybe just talk a little bit about our numbers. So we look after around 1,700 ALA alumni and around 6,000 MasterCard Foundation scholars. But on any given year, there's approximately around 1,500 young people who are actually actively looking for careers. And, we've got established, tried and tested professional development curriculum, which we use, and some of it is actually also available on the Baobab platform, which is a MasterCard Foundation platform for the Scholars Program. And they access all the professional development material through that. We engage learning designers. We actually in the process of actually revamping some of our learning material so that it's actually up to date, because we've got to keep up with the way that the world is evolving. And also, we continuously engage with career service professionals, because the reality is, unfortunately, academia cannot change fast enough. The world changed yesterday, and it will take about 5 years, maybe 10 years for curriculum to change, right? So there's that missing gap in the middle, where we've got to actually go to external service providers to come and assist our young people with the skills that they need now. Because there's the technical skills in terms of, data analysis, business analysis, all of these skills that are quite important now, your AI, your software development, and all of those things. They can get that at any sort of accredited institution. But what employers are actually looking for is something a little bit more than that. They're looking for creative thinking. They're looking for problem solving. They're looking for innovation, right? And that's got a little bit more to do with intrinsic personality things that people learn through experience and exposure. And that is the space that we try to maximize by putting together our young leaders with industry professionals to work very closely through the different programs that I mentioned, so that our young people can actually get to experience that, right? So that is maybe one of the biggest challenges, is that we're finding that because of this gap between, what academics are thinking, because they're saying that, yes, we are preparing your students, they're ready for the workplace, and the students themselves actually feel very strongly that they're very well skilled, but employers are saying, actually, no, you're not. So who must take responsibility for that space, right? And then you have a lot of organizations that do the work that we do across the continent, and we continue to collaborate with those so that we can try fill in that gap. But there's too much, and we're not doing enough. And I would like to challenge employers, and I think especially those who are already doing the work, to actually play a much bigger role in advocating across the continent about the responsibilities that employers have to train young people. What we've seen a lot is that multinationals actually take a very big responsibility for that, and I suppose a lot of it does go to funding, and that's important. But I do think as African organizations as well, we need to actually step up, because the talent is ours, and we've got to train our talent in an African context, right? And if, Safaricom, Standard Chartered are doing well in this space, let's get more employers to take the lead in developing young people. You cannot find a graduate who's fully baked. There is no such thing. Someone's got to say, okay, you've got the talent, you've got great potential, we can work with that. And then have some sort of upskilling program with us for the first 3 months or 6 months or so, and help these young people get those skills that are required, because they've already got the degree. They've already got those technical skills for the job, but the things that are actually required to succeed and thrive in the workplace are a little bit different, and only the experienced people who are working can provide that.
Can share those. And maybe I bring it to you, Munyori, just briefly, both on that upskilling part, for young people who have at least the basics, but also the other part of getting commitment. Standard Chartered has managed to get a bit of commitment, especially from the top level. And we are looking at the C-suite level, we are looking at the board level. What is it that you have done at that level? Because it starts from the leaders, before it can scale, before it can go to the different managers, the different countries. But what have you been able to do at that top level to get this kind of buy-in for disability inclusion as a corporate, not just the foundation itself, because the corporate itself is doing a lot on its own over and above what the foundation is doing. And how can you share that to other organizations which are yet to get that kind of buy-in from the top level?
And Steve, I think the excuse me, the biggest part of it is that it has been a real journey over many years. I think you've alluded to that. The fact that you are multinational, we've been in this country, Standard Chartered, about 114 years. Globally, over 150 years. So I think there is a nuance here that we should not underestimate. And I think that's why I keep insisting, anything that is worth, somebody just needs to start it. So even for us, I think it's been a journey for many years. And even being able to get our boards and our top management to think alike and say, you know what, there's something worth us paying attention to here. And this represents the clients that we serve. It should represent the base of the people who work with us and for us. And like what Michael, you're saying, including the policies that the bank has for many years, we never ever thought, I had a policy for flexi work for over 9 years before COVID hit. 2019, I was busy asking people, why don't you invoke this policy? why don't you take it? And actually came from a need. Somebody came complaining to me and saying, my boss is not allowing me, a lady who had a sick child. And I said, but we have a policy. Just go and read the policy. Tell your boss that you can work remotely. And quickly it became a miracle. COVID became a miracle because then we turned it around, and the piece on PWDs and disability then became real. And we started identifying, and we said, oh my God, we didn't see this. We were sitting on papers called policies. We were sitting on a lot that we didn't know. And it's really now become live in terms of us being able to push that direction. Having said that, I think there is still a lot of work for us. And the one that I have seen, last year I got into a program for my graduate program, and the graduate program is meant to be global. And I asked the question, I have been trying to recruit young people with disability, and I'm unable to do it. Why? I asked this lady once, there's a time I was with Paul, and people challenged me and said, where have you been looking for them? They're around, they're there. And yet I'm still not able to do it. So end of last year, as I got into my program, I said, I need to get this right. And of course, with partnership, Light for the World, Sightsavers, I said, can I get individuals who can fit into this program? Not as a token, because this is meant to be a global program. I don't want it to sound, smell, and look like Kenya. I want it to be global. And I got 84 CVs. And my problem was the reverse. And I realized the problem is me. I haven't talked about my employee value proposition to a level where people say, I want to work with that guy. I want to work with that institution. I have not whet their appetite. It hit me like a ton of bricks, because I thought, here it is, I have 6 opportunities. I want to get these guys now. I've been just talking. Now I need them. And then you get 84 CVs. Of the 84 CVs, we went several iterations to say, guys, apply. It's online. Again, there was also a bit of learning there. On some of the individuals could not even access it. The visually impaired was easy. There are others who needed interpretation and so on. So there was so much learning, and I said, this piece needs me to actually pay attention. It's not just ticking the box of saying, yes, there are opportunities, go out and apply for them. And it keeps growing for me. And even as I sat here, I was like, oh my God. Bob, when you're asking the questions, I was like, you're right. I've never thought about other counties. I've never thought about it. And hence, I think the call for us as employers is really, this is a big piece of work that just needs to keep being mapped out. As we share, as we see the points of great opportunity because they are there, then that is really what we leverage.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. Just, I know that we are closely running out of time. I want to quickly open it for a round of questions. But Dr. Laibuta, just in a few minutes, 1 or 2 minutes, from a government perspective, the judiciary is doing quite a lot in terms of accessibility, being inclusive as an employer. But what do you think we can do from this side in terms of influencing other arms of government to follow suit? Which buttons do we need to push or advocate at?
Yeah, I think systems are in place to do what we must do to achieve our targets on inclusion. But we need to be very intentional. Skills development is first on the list, just so that people are able to do what is expected of them, and when they are given opportunities, they actually deliver. The other thing is what many of you have identified, the fact that we really don't know where to get them. I remember once when I served in a commission, as commission, we sat and I said, I must have persons with disabilities here. We invited CVs, but we couldn't get a single person qualified for the job applying. Why? We don't know whether we were reaching out to the wrong places. Particularly now that we are all, most of us are working on virtual platforms. And by the way, judiciary, I have never stepped into a courtroom. But I sit in court 3 days a week virtually. And that's how we work. We hold meetings virtually, we hold conferences virtually to decide what decisions we need to make, and it's all attributable to accessibility. Now, what we need to do is keep on prodding government departments and agencies to ensure that, one, persons with disabilities have the right tools, and secondly, that they are well skilled to handle those tools and deliver on their tasks. And what I'm going to ask most of you here is, because I've started listening very carefully, are we all really prepared to put our hands in the wallet and contribute towards the tools that are needed? Steve will tell you that we just had the first attempt to place in the hands of students in the university laptops. We've had Apple contribute 20 of them. But that's just the beginning. We've got many, many more. And I keep on reminding our colleagues that we need to begin down there. When you look at other children who do not have any disability, they begin using laptops, iPads. Give a kid of 5, 10 years an iPad, and don't know what to do with it. But how about kids with visual disability? I think we need to think and begin planting the seed, and not just looking for where to find trees with fruits. You can't harvest where you've not sown. We need to sow, just so that we also cultivate and ensure that we have the right people joining the job market. We talk about 5% of persons, or rather, of those in employment sector being persons with disabilities. I'm not sure. We even have 1% as we speak. Some institutions that are intentional may have up to 3%, as I listened, 3.2 here. But by and large, we really haven't gotten there. And it's not that they are not able to. It's just that I think we really need to be very intentional in preparing them, equipping them with skills and the tools.
Thank you so much. I think I want to open it to a round of questions, not around, probably 1 or 2 questions, because we are almost out of time, and then we can close it at that point. We can still have continue this conversation over lunch, but maybe 1 or 2 burning questions.
Hi, this is Lizzie again. I'm just curious, as we're talking about skills building and training for communities of persons with disabilities, do we consider the training that we need as employers in terms of disability rights and inclusion, which then creates an enabling environment for those that we want to work with and makes us employer of choice? Because that's, for me, a critical aspect of the work that we do with stakeholders. As much as we push for inclusion, we realize that how we as a society are socialized around disability creates a real barrier in terms of access for persons with disabilities. The unconscious bias we have towards disability creates, a real problem. And if we're not addressing that, then it still becomes a top-down approach. It still becomes, we still address disability from a charity and, CSR standpoint, and we don't focus on the value addition. So a question, a comment, but have we thought about, the skills that we are lacking ourselves around disability inclusion, particularly because the reason why we're all here is the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So again, how educated are we around these issues? Yeah, thank you.
Want to respond to that?
Thank you again. I have something to add from what Honorable Judge has just said. I concur with him that the government has put in place systems that might help in employment, but I think we have to consider the issue of equity rather than equality, taking into consideration that to some extent persons with a disability suffered a lot from a number of challenges from their communities. So considering equity, the government of Tanzania put in place a minimum percentage for those for the applicant in all positions, that whenever a person with a disability making an application, consider him or her meeting the minimum pass mark, then that one could be considered. Also, to add into that, I think we need to give a kind of social rehabilitations for persons with disability. You know, sometimes even themselves, they don't trust themselves that I can do this. So we need to go ahead and rehabilitate them, informing them that they have a power to do that. With that, you can help a big number of persons with disability. Thank you.
Any employer wants to respond also from Lizzie's question, then you can go next, Hiram. Yes.
And just a quick comment, Lizzie. I think there is a level of thought process on what the Standard Chartered, I want to say employers, Standard Chartered needs internally. The biggest gap I see, and I have ran a couple of programs, good programs, Inclusion Matters, Respect at Work, and so on, internally, is the disconnect of allowing people leaders and the teams to then practice on what they see. If that is not fast enough, human beings tend to gravitate back towards their natural position. And that is also forgetting what does that really mean. So if we talk about inclusion, and that's a challenge to me, that's what I'm laying out, is I need then not just to be a disability confident organization and that has taught their managers and people what needs to get done, but to get individuals across all levels in the organization for them to practice it. That for me is a challenge.
Wow. That's the same challenge to me, but it's more around organization changing it from driving it from a metrics or KPI perspective and changing it to a culture element, so that it is the way of life, rather than looking at it on the basis that I have to meet this criterion, but then how do you live it? Then that becomes the next challenge.
I'll take Liz's challenge as something that came through nothing for us without us. Because we're in the room, and if you look at even this room, and with all due respect, if you look at the proportion, it's people speak for others and not the real people speaking for it. And the unconscious bias comes in. But the truth is, if you're going to influence the environment in which then the persons with disabilities are working, then this is the first step of the journey. The late Bob, my former boss, came and said, actually, let's get people with disability to have forums every month with the CEO. And they'll say, what can we change? And to the point that was made about Microsoft, the IVR, which is the individual voice recognition that Safaricom has, was actually initiated by somebody with a disability. And they created a product for millions of Kenyans who have that. So that piece of representation. And then he went a step further and said, there are some parents here with kids with disability. And we formed another forum for that. And those mothers and fathers actually would meet the CEO on a regular basis and say, tell me, how does it feel? And then we went in, of course, we started a creche. We had creches in the workplace. And you could find kids with disability being brought in there. And it changed the whole piece of what do you go through. And my last one, just like like Munyori was saying, before COVID, we had 200 of our people working from home. One of my colleagues and Tabby's colleagues is Diana, who is 100% visually impaired in HR. And what we've done of the 180 or so, we have door-to-door. We pick them, drop them every day. When COVID came in, we then enabled them. So accessibility is beyond physical. It's also what the judge was saying. It's also how do you provide for that? But the bigger answer to your point is nothing for us without us.
That's the best summary. Thank you. Iram, you had a point to raise and then we can close. Yeah.
I think for me it's been silently responded to by Tom and Paul in terms of how do we inculcate it into our culture, because what we have seen, especially for me with my experience, is employers tend to go for persons with disabilities for, it looks good, right? And then also, it's now a key driver in the ESG reporting. So now I'm being forced to go into that direction, not because I need to do it, but because I need to report to it. But I think it's quite important to see how do we inculcate it in our culture from the top, right? So every time you're having your CEOs talking, are they talking about inclusion, right? Are the numbers reflecting on inclusion? When it's coming to your returns of investments, what are they putting in when it comes to inclusion? And then also in terms of investment and mentorship, because a big challenge we're also facing is we have this pool of thousands of students with disabilities, and what's coming out is most of the students in Kenya have tended to focus on education because that's where the government put them, special needs education, right? And here you are talking about digital skills, the other softer skills, so what are we doing about it? Are we able to put our hands in the pocket and say, we are ready to mentor the students, and just the way we would typically have probation or internships, can we have maybe the first 1 month focusing on developing that digital skill or this so-called teacher-trained individual and shift their focus? It's not that they're not able to do it. I know Stanchart has recruited teachers who've gone into management positions, dentists, but then they've gone into banking. But then just that element of mentorship being put into place, that focus, and also having those ERGs, employee resource groups, coming in and saying, we have groups of persons with disabilities, can we put them together and see what can they bring to the table over and above the jobs that you do. And if you make that as a culture, you can see the impact.
Yeah. I'm asking for help, finally.
Yes, that's what I kept asking.
And I know we've talked about data and digital. I have a new strand that is developing, sustainability.
Okay.
I don't hear us talking about that as well. Now that's the next big thing. I think you're the one who said academia tries to catch up. By the time it does, with data and digital, now I'm talking about sustainability experts.
Yeah, thank you. I think there is, we are out of time, but we need to continue this conversation over lunch because we can't stop. And if you remember when we started, we said, from this perspective of this conference, I mean, the spirit is to bring us together, but we need to take account of what are we going to do. And we know that there are so many problems, but is it one single problem that you can be able to solve between now and the next conference? Just one. If you say, from KQ's perspective, you say that your objective right now is to make sure that your entire C-suite is properly trained on inclusion and your board. And then you tell us, can you help us figure that out? Bring us data, bring us information. Can you come and train our board? Can you come and train our C-suite managers? And by the time we are meeting in the next conference, then you'll say, as a turnaround from training our board, this is what happened. This is what, so that each of us, we can't solve everything, even if we have all this conversation continually for the rest of the day, but we can be able to pick one thing that we can do and hold each other's hand as we go for lunch and say, can we do this together? Can Africa Leadership Academy take this part? Okay, you have this and this and this. Can you bring it? Can you collaborate with Google on this and this? And we are happy to be your secretaries. We can take all those notes and keep each one of you in account as you keep us in account, so that we actually do that. Like the challenge that Paul has given us, we need to be also inclusive. If you look at the room, that we have more representation, we have more persons with disabilities at this level, and it has been the default. And like Munyori is saying, we always retreat to default when we don't find enough motivation at the level that we are in to push us to that next level that we need to go. So I need to close this at this time. Irene, I give you the last word.
Thank you so much, Steve. I think we've had a fantastic discussion, and it's not over, so we will be calling additional roundtables just to have a conversation and see what can we solve together, because we all have great ideas, and you might find we might be able to help each other and come up with solutions that we can share across the continent. So the one thing I'd like you to take away if you're from private sector, take away disability from CSR. If you can help us do that, it is the toughest conversation. We need to see the value in disability. Because every conversation we have, everyone sends us to CSR. It's not a CSR. They're like any other employee you have. They have the same potential or even better. So if you can work on that and we can help, that's the purpose of these roundtables, is to figure out how can we change that messaging. The other piece is leadership. Until we have young people with disabilities in leadership positions, we'll keep singing songs. So let's say for the next 5 years, we'll keep working together. And our job is to push them to leadership positions so that they can dictate the budgets. When someone without a disability is coming to tell you how this should be done, you're like, no, I have the experience. We are proving this. So those are the two things you can really take away that will have a huge impact in the disability space. So I want to say thank you so much for coming. I think we will share some notes definitely with each one of you. So make sure if you didn't register for this session, share your email, and we will be able to communicate further on further discussions. And thank you for your time, but please join us downstairs for lunch before you leave. Awesome, thank you.